Hello guys, like the mug? Yeah, beyond fashion, a bit like me that. So right, here we are then, another video for you today, and this is going to be the start of a series of probably quite a few short videos rather than just 1, 2 or 3 long ones. I have a feeling that making these videos is going to be quite difficult because I think I'm going to reach stages where I need to stop and restore something, paint something, whatever. So I think rather than sort of stretch it out over a week for me into an hour-long video for you, I think what I'll do is just lots of small bits and pieces. And again, it will show you how a Puma engine goes together. This is the 2.4. The 2.2 is very similar. There's a different fuel pump arrangement, and the coolant pipes are a little different, I think. But basically, pretty much, you know, the same going together. So basically what we're going to do is, in this video, we're going to put the bottom end together. So that's just basically the crank. I don't mean the rods and the pistons. This is just going to be all about getting the crank cleaned, getting all the block cleaned, getting all the bearings fitted, checking all the clearances, and going from there. So without further ado, let's get to the bench and have a look and see what we got. Okay, so here we are once again with my favourite sheet of cardboard. As you know, I like to have cardboard on the bench to keep everything clean. And as I've said so many times, you know, like one day I'm building an engine, next day I'll be sandblasting. So it's a bit difficult. I don't have an engine building room and a machining room, and you know, like most people do, I just have a garage with a little milling machine, a little lathe, a load of shelves, some welding bottles, and a Mustang, and some other bits and pieces around as well. So and a nice Land Rover mug. There we go. So basically, this is what we've got on the bench now. So we've got our bearing caps, and what's really nice from this engine, this is a Ford engine, it's a 2.4 as fitted to the Transit. It's called a Tdci Land Rover, named it Puma. So what is nice on these caps, as you can see, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they've also got the arrows going forward. So that's really nice they've done that. I wish all manufacturers would do that, because there's no way you can get them mixed up. Often it's left you to mark them themselves. In here I've got the old, I keep everything in Chinese takeaway boxes, or Indian takeaway boxes, or just indeed takeaway boxes. And these bearings are the main bearings that came out. As you can see, when I took them out, I numbered them. But we can see that they are in extremely good condition. So, you know, do I need to replace them? I don't know. I think I'll fit the new bearings and we'll see what the clearances are like. If the clearances are up near top limit or whatever, then I think we'll have a look at those and see, maybe run those again. We shall see. This here is just box E. If you remember, I got my little blue book. I'll get the blue book out and show you. And so when I strip the engine down, we've got box A. Okay, and then this is the great big aluminium part that goes on the side of the block. This is where your air conditioning mounts if you have it. But I've sort of shown where all the bolts go and the lengths and everything. So if you are building one of these and you're sort of lost for bolt lengths, there you go. And then over the page here, obviously, because the camera's on, I can't turn the left page. Got box B, and what I do is I write down what everything is. So right hand engine mount, 4M 10 by 45 with 4 washers. Dipstick is 1M 8 by 20 volt. And then you can see going down here, M10 by 45 and washers, and blah 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 blah, as you all the way through, and then up to box E, and this is actually box E here. And I have realised today that what I've done, I've boxed these bolts up, but I haven't cleaned them, so I'm going to have to spend a couple of hours tomorrow cleaning all these bolts. So what I have done today is clean this is the filter here. I'll talk more about that in a second. We've got the oil squirters. These call the piston crown. They go up inside the block and spray up onto the back of the pistons, keep them clean. There is actually a little pressure relief valve in there. So the oil is pressed in through here, and then there's a ball and spring in there, and then it comes out of this jet here. So obviously when the oil pressure is not enough, then it will keep the oil pressure in the engine rather than allow it all to leak through here. So they're a pretty good little pressure relief valve if you have got a very willing pump, shall we say. And we've got the 4 little Torx bolts that hold them in, and you can see they've got thread lock, so I'll be reapplying some thread lock to them and they'll go in. And then these are the bolts for the main bearings. They go into these bearing caps, and I have noticed in the manual they actually say, when you see the bolts, that these are actually screws. When they're threaded all the way up, they're hexagon headed screws. They actually say in the manual these can be used 4 times, which is unusual. And they ask you to mark them with a centre punch on how many times they've been used. So I know this is my engine that I bought from new, so I know they've been used once. Now I don't know if they include the torquing down for checking bearing clearances as being used, but we're going to use them no more than 4 times. If I do actually get to the stage where I'm messing around and I've any doubt, I'm going to change them, because for what they cost, it's peace of mind. You know, it's not worth going on and using them 5-6 times and forever wondering if it's going to be okay. Remember, this is a diesel engine, it's got huge internal loads, massive compression, so not worth messing with stuff like this. So we shall see how we get on. So that's on the bench, and that's all cleaned and ready to go. These have actually been washed in paraffin and then cleaned in solvent, so that's all good. So they're all nice, ready to go. And then over here we've got the block itself. Now, if you haven't seen this before, go back and have a look when I stripped it. But I've painted it, and I've painted it in this lovely light grey colour, and this is actually hammerite, hammerite smoothite. And what I've done, I've made a mix of white and black, and I've got this light grey colour. The reason being is, as you know, I've got an old Ford there, and there's the chassis up there, and that is the original colour that Ford used in World War II. So I've decided to use that colour. So it's a 4x4 vehicle, it's green, and it's the engine's made by Ford, so why not, eh? But Ford just leave these unpainted, so they just go rusty. So it looked a mess, so I thought I'd give it a coat of paint. So everything's all clean. I've given the bores a quick honing, very, very light honing with a honing stone on a drill, just literally just to make sure and clean them up, just to take any bridges out or any steps that might be at the top, and that's all done. And then everything then is cleaned out and blown out. One thing to remember as well with these, if I can get, let me grab a light so I can show you something that's really worth checking on these guys. If you're building one, check and check again. Down in the bottom of these holes, I can get the camera on the right angle and get the light in there. There we go. You can see down there it's a blind hole. All of these are full of swarf. It looks like what Ford do is drill them, tap them, and then don't clean them out, and it looked like tapping swarf. So you know, get an airline in there, blow them out, get some paraffin in there, get some brake cleaner in there, get them all nice and cleaned out, because the last thing you want is where you've been turning the engine over, you might get a bit of swarf sticking a thread. You don't want it coming out when you've got a bearing in there, whatever. You don't want it jamming up on a thread. So blow them out with an airline, clean them out with petrol, clean them out with brake cleaner, get them all nice and clean, just like these are. So they're clean all the way down in the bottom, you can see there. Okay, so that's worth doing. All of these here I've gone around and tapped them because they were all quite rusty, so they've all been tapped out with an M8 tap. Any oil plugs or anything that are blanked, these were all blanked. So basically what would happen now, this filter, this is where the oil, I don't know which way it's going, I don't know if it's coming from a gallery in here into the crank, or if it's going from the crank up to the head. I think it's probably going to crank up to the head, and this filter goes in line and actually filters the oil going into the head or vice versa. I think it's probably going to the head, and then that presses down in there, okay, and that's going to bottom out. If you will be building one of these, you probably don't know that's in there. It's in this is the front of the engine upside down, and it's in that gallery there, and all I did was got a large self tapper, and I just gently just screwed it into the end because it is a fairly softish plastic, and then just sort of pulled it out. You can see it's you can get the camera to focus. It's like a plastic material, and you should be able to get in there just with a screw and just pull it out, and then give it a wash out and blow out and give it a good clean. So that's going to go in there like that, but I'm not putting it in yet. And then these squirters, oil coolers, whatever you want to call them, they're going to go down in there like so, okay, and then the bolt holder line up, and as you can see that's going to spray oil up to the top of the piston crown when the pressure's high. So but I'm not putting them in yet either, because what I want to do first of all is measure all the bearing clearances. Now the reason I'm not building anything first, the reason I want to put all the bearings in first, if we find we've got an issue with the crank, if we have a taper on the crank, or if we've got an issue with bearings or anything, we don't want this hanging around with those parts left in it. I want to leave this as a bare block. If it's got an issue, I'll leave it as a bare block, and then I can wash it again. You know, if I happen to be in here grinding or something, and I happen to get some grinding spray on it or anything like that, I don't want this engine to be built in any way, shape or form. So what I'll do is I'll check all my bearing clearances, check everything's good, and then when I know all is good, then I'll start by putting that filter in there, put those in, and then we'll start to build the engine and go from there. So the other thing I'll probably do, I'll probably check the clearances on these bearings, and I'll check the clearances on the rod bearings before we do any building, and then we know we're all good. If I had a build shop, I would have internal mics and everything. I'd mic up and work out my clearances rather than using plastigauge. But for doing this, I'm going to use plastigauge. The clearances I've got from a Ford Transit manual, because Land Rover give you nothing in their manual at all. But the clearances I've got are on the conrod bearings, it's 0.34 to 0.1. So that's like, what's that, like 1.5 to 4 thou on the conrod bearings. On these bearings, they're talking 0.04. Okay, that's ridiculous. That's like what is it? I can't think. It's tiny. It's a few tenths of a thou, up to 0.051. So that's 2 thou. So I think it's like 5 tenths or 4 tenths to 2 thou on the mains, and then this rear one, which is slightly bigger but slightly narrower, is slightly different. It's a slightly bigger tolerance, I think. But we'll have a look what they're like with the plastigauge, and we'll go from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the new bearings, fit them in, and then we'll get the crank dropped in, torque everything down, and check our clearances. Okay, so we've got the crank on the bench now. As you can see, it's all nice and clean. We clean it off with some brake cleaner and everything. It's been in the house, so it hasn't been wet or cold. It hasn't rusted or anything. It just had some dust and stuff on it, but it's been in a bag, but the dust still got in the bag somehow, I don't know. But basically there we go, so that's all sorted, clean enough to go in. You'll see I still haven't replaced this piece of cardboard. It's because this isn't actually the final build. So once we finally build this, I'll clean it all off with brake cleaner again, just to make sure there's nothing on here, because you don't want something getting in a bearing while you're building it or whatever. I've got the bearings here. These are the King bearings. Now that's the number of them there, and they're saying standard. Now, for what they cost, they're about 18 or 25 pounds or something for a set, which is just ridiculous. So you get in all your main shells there, and then you've got the center bearing there with the thrust washers on it, made as one piece. The original was separate parts. So I'm sort of quite keen to see how this all goes together. I think the first thing I can do is check that thrust bearing in there and see what the end float's like on the crank. What I think I'll have to do is measure the thickness of this one compared to that one, the original one, because I'm not sure I've got a spec for the actual thing. As I say, the Land Rover manual gives you no specs whatsoever. So for bearing clearance, not that I can find anyway. If somebody knows different, then please tell me. So basically I hunted online and found a 2006 on Transit manual, and it gives all the clearances in there. In fact, I might go another look, see if it's got an end float for it. But basically, yeah, everything's good. The crank is in really, really good condition. It's basically unmarked, other than a line here, which is nothing, and there is also a line here. It looks like that is where the edge of the bearing's been running there, to be honest. But you know, really, really nice, really good condition. So I'm going to get these bearings open, get them put into the block and then into the bearing caps, and then we'll assemble it with some plastigauge and see where we are. Okay, so we've got the bearings in. Bearings are in the caps there, as you can see here. You can also see I've got a scalpel here. That's not only for getting them out of the packaging, but also you need to clean them up. You need to make sure. I've actually cleaned the bench, but there was a couple of bits and pieces, especially when you get into these bearings here. You can see you've got the groove in them. Make sure that there's nothing around the ends of the grooves. No little bits of stray material or anything. Just give it a little scrape, just a bit of a deburr, and then you can go from there. So to check my clearances, I'm going to be using plastigauge. I've got this one here, which is ACL FlexiGauge. It's the same sort of thing. Clearance 0.25 to 0.25 to 0.76. So that's like 1 to 3 thou, which is fine, but it's not at the higher end of the range. So if I have got 0.1 clearance or 0.12, I won't be able to see it. Whereas with this one here, this one's 1 to 7 thou, 0.25 to 0.175. And as you can see, it's quite a fat red. It's just basically, it's plastic, and I'll show you in a minute how you use it. You just basically put it all together, and then you compare the squashed width with this, and then you can see how much clearance you've got. And if you notice, I've got the crank in so that the actual oil feeds for the main bearings are just off, so we can get the plastigauge on the top of the mains without being interfered with that hole. So it's together don't turn it, don't do anything, just put it together. We'll place some of this plastigage on the top and then we'll pull the caps down and we'll have a look and see what it's like. Right, so we've cut our plastigage into lengths, and then we've got here on the engine, as you can see, there's a piece lead there, piece lead there, piece lead there, piece there, piece there. And if you notice, I've gone like the full width of the bearings. I've seen people do this before with a very short length, and the trouble with that, it doesn't show if you've got any taper. So like, if for instance this bearing here has been ground with a taper, or in fact the bearing I've put on has got a massive taper in it, it'll show. You know, you might think you've got perfect clearance in the centre. It could be right. It could be 0 here and sort of 0.2 over here and perfect in the middle. You want to make sure that it's right the way across. So otherwise you will lose lots of oil pressure through there. So we need to make sure these main bearings are spot on. So I'm going to get the caps on now, get them torqued down, and then what I'll do is take them off. Well, I'll show you the torquing down. Okay, so you can watch me torque this up now, and if you don't want to watch it then you can fast forward. First one is 45 Newton meters. We've got to go in a pattern. So what I'm going to do first of all is just bring them all down rather than go straight to a torque. I just want to go down to the like nip tap. I'm going to go 45 Newton meters. Now I've put a very light drop of oil on these underneath the heads of the bolts, and I've also put one little drop of oil on the threads just to stop any binding. Go up to this one. It's always worth, when you're building anything, just get everything pulled down before you start going to torques. Otherwise you could find you're torquing this bolt down here and this side could still be way up. You know, it's not good to do that. So just make sure they're seated, pull down to their correct position, and then give them their torque then. And then last of all, we'll do the front one. Okay, and then after that it's 80 Newton meters in the same pattern. So we'll go, this is where the engine stand starts to roll around the garage. I've gone the wrong way on the sequence, but it doesn't matter as long as you go from the centre out. The main thing is not to just go, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Although I was at the Ostermova factory once and I saw them putting heads on marina blocks, and they just went no sequence whatsoever. So I don't know. So the last one now is 105 degrees, so this is going to be quite a struggle, so it might all go wrong, we shall see, but it's 105 degrees, and if you've never seen one, this is what I use. This is my angle gauge. So we're going to go in here, we're going to get to somewhere where I can pull it nicely. Okay, so we get over here, okay, and then we'll set that against something. In this case it's that bearing journal. Set this to 0, make sure that's tight, okay, and then we literally pull around to 105 degrees, which is 90, 100, 110, so 105 is here. So we're just going to pull it round. God blimey. This is going to be a struggle. I think I'd be better off putting the block on its side. Oh dear, dear, dear. So what I do now is take that out of there. Blimey, that is bloody tight. Ugh. That's 90, that's going to be tight enough. It's going to have to be. So again, we go round to there, set the gauge to 0, and then pull round to 90. That's going to be tight enough. Just for doing this. Jesus. There we go, 90. And then we'll go on to here. We'll go on to here. Get that out of the way. Down there, set it to 0. Well, we can't just fall back into this tiny dent it. I'm subconsciously good. Break the end off the nice stand. This is probably the other one. Garage working at epoxy really. That's a lot easier if I put the engine like side. So the engine like that, and then when we work on it, so we're going to go 90. across to this one. Turn until it stops. Set 0. 9. 20. Go on. Right. There we go. So that is everything done up, and we'll leave it like this to undo it, because now we're going to undo everything and look at the plastigage. Okay, so I've moved the camera so you can see 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 5 are just out of sight, but I can't get the camera high enough to sort of get it zoomed in, but never mind. So we can look at 2, 3 and 4, and I'll show you what the how this stuff works. I'm sure you've seen it before, but if you haven't, I'm sure you'll be interested. So we've got a piece of card here which has got some, basically some red marks on it. And if you remember, we had that tiny little sliver, that sort of 1mm diameter of plastigage. And what this is doing, this is telling us the clearance we've got in inches. So they're inches, and on the back we've got millimetres. Okay, down here we've got millimetres. So the actual clearance from the transit manual for our mains, 2, 3 and 4, are 005 to 051. So that's 0.005 to 051. So basically here we are in metric. So if it's between there and above, we're okay. Okay, so basically, let me get the lights. You can see this one here, this is 0.5, or the maximum is 0.51. So if it's any skinnier than that, then these bearings are no good. If it's down here, it means we've got 0.63. Okay, so that's the maximum. It can be 0.005, which is nothing. I can't believe they could even have the crank straight enough to run true and have that sort of clearance. So basically we're going to have a look at this and see how they look. Now I haven't looked at this, so it's all new to me as well. So what I've done is taken the bolts out, just remove the oil from the top of the caps here, and then give them a little tap just to free them up, and then we can remove them. So now we can take this away, and you can see we've got on the bearing there, we've got a stain. On here you've got the actual plastigage, and it's looking good at the moment. So what we do then is we take this piece of card and we look. So it's fatter than that, but it's thinner than the 038. So we know that it's between 0.5, and you can see it's much wider than the 0.63. That's the 0.63 there. Okay, so it's much wider than that one. It's wider than the 0.5, and it's narrower than the 0.38. So we know, if we look at the thou side, that's 1.5 thou there. Okay, so it's narrower than 1.5 thou, and that's 2 thou. Okay, so it's wider than that one. So it's narrower than 1.5, so it's about 1 3/4 thou. So it's about 0.04, 0.045 against the spec of 0.05 to 0.51. So it's on the high side. Not such a bad thing. So we'll see how this one looks, number 3. This one looks a little bit wider, to be honest. So this one again, we're in millimetres, so it's wider than 0.05, narrower than 0.38. So it looks like we're about the same. So we're on sort of, yeah, it's about 0.45 millimetres. It's about 1.6 thou. It's much wider than the 2 thou, but it's narrower than the 1.5, but only just. So it's about, say it's about 1.6, 1.7 thou, thou and 7/10. So again, about 0.4. Let's have a look at number 4. We can see here, this one, again, it's much wider than the 0.5, but it's narrower than the 0.38. So we've got a constant sort of 0.4 clearance on here. Now I'm just going to have a look at number 1 off camera, and that one's moved slightly, but again we've got exactly the same thing. It's probably more like 4.8. That one is closer to the 0.5. And then this rear bearing, the tolerances are different. So you can see on there, look, kiss marks. Looks like somebody's kissed it, doesn't it? Let me move the camera slightly if I can, so you can see number 5. There you go. And then we've got, yeah, again we're up around the sort of 0.4. we've got a wider tolerance band for this bearing here. It's a larger bearing, so you get a wider tolerance band. So this is 0.004 millimeters to 0.054 millimeters. So as I say, we're up there. We're up on the tolerance pretty high, but we're well within. Now, having a crank on the mains that doesn't have tiny clearances isn't always a bad thing. Tiny clearances can cause rubbing that, and then you start to get wear. If you've got a nice little clearance like this, then you can see that you've got a, you know, you can have a good oil film around all the time. And also you have to remember that the crank, in this example, these bearings are feeding your crankshaft bearings as well. So, in fact, off the camera you can't see me. These bearings are feeding the crankshaft bearings as well, the conrod, sorry. So you need a good film of oil around here, you know, but you also need good pressure. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at what the old bearings are like that I took out, and if the clearances on them are smaller than these, I'm going to be tempted to use them, because as I say, you know, against the tolerance of 0.005 to 0.51, and we're up around the 4.042, then you know, we're up there, we're near the top end. So let's just see how we go with the older bearings. Okay, so we'll do the same again. Now this time I've got the old bearings in there, took it all apart, cleaned it all up, got all the plastigage off the crank, took the old bearing or the new bearings out, I've put the old bearings in, more plastigage, torqued it all down, 90 degrees again, not the 105. Let's have a look. What can you see on here? You can see 2, 3 and 4 again. So we'll get our piece of cardboard and we'll take out number 2. And straight away that looks a bit wider to me, which is a good thing. So we can see on there, so here we're in millimeters, so we're, oh no, we're about the same. So 050, that's 038 there, so we're about the same on that one. Number 3 looks narrower, and that, remember, narrower is more clearance. Yeah. That one's more like just under 05. This one looks narrower as well. Yeah, so these clearances are pretty much on top limit. Now I know you can't see this, but I'm going to look at number 1. Number 1 again is bigger, and number 5. See if I can move the camera so you can see 5. There we go, you can see 5 now. Tripods have 3 legs. Yeah, again, that's bigger than, that's more clearance than the other one. Where's my other number 5 bearing? Where have you gone, number 5? You can see here, there's number 5 with the old bearings, and there's number 5 with the new bearings, so we can see that it's actually a lot wider than that one is. Okay, so basically it looks like we're stuck with what we've got. I'm certainly not going into crank rewinding and stuff like that, or playing with bearings. Now if this was a Japanese engine, you would have all the different grades, either in like yellow, green, brown, red, purple, blue, or you'd have A, B, C, D, E. I have built an FA20 Subaru engine, which is out of a Toyota GT86, and I managed to play with the bearings, and what you can do, because there's such a tiny difference, you can use half of one and half of the other and get your clearances lovely. The other thing we need to do with this is check the run out. Now I haven't done it, I haven't turned this in the engine at all. What I'll do, I'll leave these old bearings in, and then what I'll do tomorrow, I'll check the run out on the crank, and basically what we do is we put a clock on every bearing and see if we've got any run out. I've seen people just put a clock in the middle. Sorry, you can't see what I'm talking about. I've seen people put a clock just in the middle main bearing and then turn the ends to see if you've got run out. Now the trouble is, if it's sitting in the middle and this end is whipping up and down, or this bearing's whipping up and down, you won't see it. So basically, I'll be clocking every bearing, and then we'll see if we've got any run out. But with clearances of sort of 04, then 04 to sort of 045, then I think we're going to have to stick with that. So we'll see what how that goes. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. So basically we will be putting the new bearings in because we do have tighter clearances and obviously they're not worn. These bearings here, the old bearings, aren't worn at all, but the new bearings have a better clearance, tighter clearance, so I'm going to go for that. Give us a couple of pounds up in the oil pressure getting to everywhere else. So I guess the next video then is going to be actually checking the com rod clearances. I may not do a full length video on that because you've seen it was exactly the same thing. You put them on, you put the plastigauge on, you torque them down and you check them like that, and that's the way it goes. So I'll see you for the next video, whichever that may be. We may actually start building this engine properly for the next video. In the meantime, I'll do the com rods. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.